let's use that as a little segue into our final segment. And let's drop our predictions for this Sunday night game, of course. We hope it happens in the first place. My first prediction is that it will happen. I'm feeling pretty optimistic about this. And my second prediction is that USC takes this by a score of 24. It's actually going to be a pretty close game. Washington State has looked like a solid team so far. They hung in there with Oregon until late when the Ducks pulled away. And then the first game they won, obviously, over Stanford, Oregon State, who we now know is really good. So this is a team. They're going to be fully rested. They're going to be, definitely going to have some COVID hangover effect, I guess, but so will the Trojans. So I don't know if that's going to be a huge factor that we really need to swing one way or the other. So I got a 24-21 win for USC. I think that if this game is close late, the Trojans have shown that they are clutch enough to get the job done. But I think it all comes down to preparation for this team, and I think that if they're prepared, they should come away with a win.
Yeah, I predicted this yesterday on our show. A fairly similar idea, I think it's going to be a close game, for all you, gamblers out there. WSU spread, I like it. WSU plays well against the spread. You mentioned that Oregon game. I told people to get on that one, and if they didn't give up a bunch of big runs on that final drive, Oregon was just going to run the clock out in a 7-point game. So that was not a 14-point game, even though it's what it ended up being. But I predicted 31-30 WSU. I said we've got 2 games canceled. I'm done picking the other team to win. I said the rest of the season is hope for me. I'm gonna be very hopeful for this season. So I said 31-30. And I also added on, I think we're going to see a Blake Mazza game-winning, game-ending, 30 seconds or less field goal from our kicker, who had one, I think, blocked in 2018 against you guys. But I'm waiting. It's his moment. I think he's going to do it. And so, and I just think the guy's great. So I went even and predicted that. But I do think, it's going to be a close game. Because also these teams just play close. I mean, I think the past 2 matchups are both very close. So I think we can expect more of that.
Yeah, I think the other thing about this game is both teams are entering from a really interesting standpoint from like an emotional side of things. Not to get too deep, I guess, but I mean, Washington State's going to be hungry. It will have been 22 days since they last played a single game, and whenever you take a bunch of college football players away from the game for 22 days, they're going to want to come out with a little bit of extra fire, a little bit of extra energy, and really bring it. And the Trojans will have that with the 14-day, absence. But this is also a team that there might be a tiny bit of like, okay, what the cancellation did last week and also what the Oregon State win over Oregon did was it pretty much kicked the Pac-12, including the Trojans, out of the college football playoff. So I wonder if there's like a little bit, I don't know, maybe I'm speculating a little bit too much here. I tend to do that sometimes. But maybe there's a little bit of like, the aspirations were higher for this team coming into the season, and they're 3-0, and yet somehow it seems like those higher goals like the CFP are unattainable to this point. I don't think that's going to affect them on the field, to be honest, because like I said, they've been away for like 2 weeks. They're a college football team. They're playing at SC. They love playing football. They're going to be hungry, of course. But I wonder if there's going to be a tiny bit of that, and that's the kind of thing that I think will take effect most at the beginning of the game. And if you have Washington State coming out super hungry, maybe they've figured out how to keep their time and keep their schemes, keep their formations, whatever. As I was talking about through the 22-day or not. I mean, they've been practicing for part of that, but they managed to keep some of those things intact and sort of in rhythm, despite not playing for 22 games. And the Trojans come out kind of slow. Washington State goes up maybe 10 points early. I don't know. I mean, as I said, this team SC has shown that they can come back late. But it's also not a really sustainable way of winning games to just like go down 2 touchdowns going into the last 5 minutes in the fourth quarter and somehow miraculously pull out with it. I know it was only a 1-score game against Arizona, but the point still applies. So this is a game that I don't think USC can really afford to fall down big early in. I think that they're going to have to come out hot. I do agree with Scott. I think that they will be fun. but I think it's going to be an interesting game. I think the 11.5 point spread was kind of ridiculous. I guess they haven't learned their lesson that like when you pick SC as a 2 possession, 2 touchdown favorite, it usually does not quite work out. We saw that against Arizona. And then, of course, they were 2.5 point favorites against Utah, and they won by 16 points. So whatever the odds makers are saying, just bet the opposite, I guess.
Do the opposite. Yeah. I like that you brought up kind of some of the narrative stuff about it, because this is something I talked about that, if I'm ignoring all like on field matchup, all this stuff, and I'm just looking at this from a narrative perspective, which I think sports does play out in narratives a lot, then WSU has a great case for like this narrative win here. You got, 2 games missed because of COVID. You got your true freshman quarterback coming out of quarantine. USC's 3-0. They're eyeing a Pac-12 South, kind of win to get to that Pac-12 championship game. They've got UCLA next week, and the one thing we know about the Pac-12, the one inevitable about the Pac-12 is that crazy stuff is going to happen. We saw it last week with Oregon State, and USC hasn't had that happen yet. I think WSU, I think it's their turn to kind of throw a wrench into, everything that we think we know about the Pac-12. They did it before, like I mentioned. I mean, 2017, they beat the Sam Darnold, 4th or 5th ranked USC Trojans, on a Friday in Pullman. So, I mean, they've done it before. I don't think they're taking them out of the playoffs this time or taking them from such a high ranking. But, I mean, Pac-12 loves to just beat each other up. And, does UCLA do that to USC? I don't know. But I think WSU can. I think, obviously, I'm predicting it. But it's like, if you're just looking at it as this, these narratives, like the narratives are going to play out that WSU has this crazy underdog. Like, yeah, we haven't played in 22 games and we just beat, like, this undefeated team in the conference. So I think that's also an interesting thing, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that plays out like that on.
Yeah, I will say I think the unfortunate thing for Cougar fans is that it's not entirely about the narratives, and they certainly play a role, especially in the Pac-12, especially in 2020. They are certainly there. But in the end, what I always come back to, I feel like a broken record. I say this pretty much every week, is that USC, I think, is the more talented team. I think there are position groups and there are positions, especially if Max Borghi is in, that I think Washington State has a slight edge in. But I think overall, I think USC's roster beats out the Cougars. Again, I think for me, it's going to come down to not just who can play, but how much people can play for, how much they need to rely on backups, third stringers, fourth stringers, whatever it might come to. So we'll see. I think it's going to be a great game. I think the thing that stands out to me about all this COVID layoff stuff is that these games start slow when they're first coming back, and they usually don't slow. I mean, that usually doesn't translate to a whole bunch of points. It usually translates to a pretty low scoring game. I think we're going to see that, especially in the first half. I think things will pick up in the second half, especially. But again, I see this being a low scoring game, a defensive battle, I guess, or I guess an offensive stalemate, battle. Whatever. Yeah, whatever. However you really want to put that. So I don't know. This is going to be a great game. Like, this is, I think, one of the best matchups in the Pac-12 this week. I mean, I think.
I mean, it's going to be a good game. I think, the Pac-12 likes to do that. They like to create these good games. If USC plays up to its, potential, I agree with you. They have more talent than this team. They sometimes don't like to play like it, thinking about that Arizona game. But they definitely, I think it will be a good game. We're going to see some Pac-12 after dark on a Sunday, which is, there's nothing. I just think some weird Pac-12 stuff's going to happen. Weird enough. But it's definitely going to be an interesting game to tune in and watch, because, anything can happen in the Pac-12. There's not a team that is, leagues above everybody else.
Yeah. I'm just going to caution USC fans, do not be shocked if Washington State wins this game, or at least makes it close. And I think you kind of nailed it on the head. The fact that this is a weird Sunday night football, I guess, kind of game, just adds to the narrative of this being even weirder for both teams. But that's going to.
Oh, I was going to say, everybody knows if there's one conference in college football that can compete against the NFL on Sunday night, it's the Pac-12. There's no doubt.
I'll leave that there. That is going to do it